Hey, what's up, guys? It's Moonlord here, and yes, that's right. We're gonna be talking about some Final Fantasy, but we're gonna be talking about Final Fantasy 17 because apparently Yoshi P was throwing around ideas of what Final Fantasy 7 could potentially be and what developers he would love to see work on the next entry of Final Fantasy. And it's quite interesting about some of the ideas he would love to see in Final Fantasy 17 and the approach to the gameplay moving forward. And it sounds like to me that he wants to do away with what happened in Final Fantasy 16 in terms of gameplay and do a kind of interesting approach that I've talked about on Twitter, which we'll get into. So before we dive into the video, make sure you hit the subscribe button and notification bell for more gaming content here on this channel. Yes, Final Fantasy has, especially on this channel, has always been a topic of debate, especially the future of Final Fantasy. I already gave you my opinion of Final Fantasy 16. I'm still slogging through the game. Like I said, I'm not really too fond of the Final Fantasy 16 gameplay mechanics. Going full on action is less RPG than it ever was before. It feels more like a spin-off Final Fantasy game than a main entry Final Fantasy game, since, like I said before, spin-off and main titles have totally two different expectations, you know, and Final Fantasy 16 feels more of a spin-off than the main line to me, in my personal opinion. So you guys can flame me in the comment sections below for those of you who love Final Fantasy 16, but that's my opinion. Oh well. Well, apparently Yoshi P was asked in an interview about, you know, what a potential Final Fantasy 17 would be, and he pretty much gave his overall thoughts about it. So we're going to cover it here on Game Radar about Final Fantasy, about Yoshi P and his thoughts on it. So it says Yoshi P floats the idea for Final Fantasy 17, a real-time turn-based hybrid or return to pixel art. Now this is pretty interesting because I also said on one of my posts on Twitter that a particular title, a JRPG that's pretty much out in Japan, had pretty much took an approach like that, and I was like, how come Final Fantasy 7 Remake couldn't take such an approach like that? But we'll get into that later in this video. So it says he also likes the idea of a new, younger director instead of the same old guys, and that would be interesting. I would like to see what a younger team could do, especially a younger team who actually played the Final Fantasy games, the original Final Fantasy games, who are actually fans of the Final Fantasy games. I would love to see how they would take their approach, since they have grown up playing Final Fantasy, and see how they would approach that. But we'll get farther into that much later. So it says Final Fantasy 16 producer Naoki Yoshida, aka Yoshi P, has floated two very early ideas for Final Fantasy 17. A hybrid of a real-time and more traditional turn-based combat, and another that will bring the series back to pixel art roots. Now, I said on my Twitter, I saw some gameplay footage floating around for the more recent Trails of game. And when I looked at the gameplay mechanics, it had two different seamless actions. You had live action, and then you can actually go into turn-based, which I thought was pretty awesome. It was just seamless. And I said to myself, like, and I said to my audience, like, yo, why couldn't Final Fantasy even take this approach for those people who want to play the more action RPG approach? Have that option, and for those who want to actually play it in turn-based, they could also have that option as well. And I said, it's not like Square Enix don't have the ability to not do it, or the capabilities of not being able to do it. I'm pretty sure that Square Enix can do it, and they're a much bigger company than Falcom themselves, but Falcom was actually able to pull that off with no problems and no issues. So I'm pretty sure that Square Enix can do that themselves. So we had an interesting debate in the comment sections about that, and yeah, so Final Fantasy 17, if they actually make an approach like that, and of course Square Enix would add their twist to it, I think they would be able to expand upon that, you know, to flesh it out even more. But I think that, you know, other companies have done it, especially, like I said, the Trails of series. They laid the foundation on the blueprint and said, hey, even Atlas took some attempts with their newest game, the Metaphor Fantasio, that's coming out as well.
To achieve this, we decided to adopt a new battle system where we have the command battles as the base, but on top of that, we've incorporated a system where you're able to defeat enemies on the field directly if you determine that they are weaker than you. It's not a separate two-part system where some enemies can only be fought in command battles, or some must be defeated with action. We actually let the players judge which enemies are stronger than they are or which ones they have fought before. We were very particular about letting the player make that determination and giving players the option to choose at all times.
So I think that's interesting. So it says, speaking to Sony veteran Yoshida for the AS Game Maker's Notebook podcast, Yoshi P was asked whether he'll be directing Final Fantasy 17. After hesitating because he's on board of directors now, he skirted around the question and offered that maybe it's time for someone new instead of having the same old guys handle the next one. Dang, tough break, Tetsuya Nomura. And the reason why he's dancing around it, because I think that there could be a possibility he could be working on it, but also I believe the reason why he even said this question, because he probably already thinking of a younger team, a younger director to work on the next one. This is why that's why he probably threw that out there, and to get the audience, to get everybody, talking about it. And I think that would be pretty interesting. So I quote, he said, "I think in some ways it will be a good look to the future and bring in a younger generation with more youthful sensibilities to make a new Final Fantasy with challenges that suit today's world," Yoshi P said. And like I said before, I think a younger generation, I think, and some new blood, I think it would be pretty cool. I would love to see what they would do, for the simple fact is that a lot of these younger generations grew up as fans of the original games. They played the original games. They know what they like as a fan. So I would love to see how they would take that approach. And like I said, the old heads, I always have respect for my old heads. The old heads, they have done a good job. They have created some of the best franchises, since the 80s and through the 90s. I've been through it all. I watched these franchises become mega blockbusters. And I think it is about time for a new generation, because like I said, a lot of the old heads, after a while, they tend to burn out, or they tend to not, their creativity is not the same as it used to be, and they fall into like this cycle, or they fall into this mode to where they wonder like what the young kids like. So they try to follow trends and try to take these trends and put it into their games, and it kind of like push off the fan base that grew up with the game and say, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, why are you doing this to our favorite, series that we've grown and love, So it's following up on that, Yoshida asks Yoshi P what advice would he give a younger Final Fantasy 17 director. And the famed producer proceeded his answer by saying, "Final Fantasy is about challenging what's been done before. And it's for that reason that he pondered the possibility of 2 different Final Fantasy 17s. Oh, wait a minute here. What's going on? Let's see where this is going. While I'm certainly not looking to pick a fight with older games, we all make Final Fantasy games thinking mine would be the most fun. So my advice is to dive in and first put down on paper what you believe would be the most enjoyable Final Fantasy before thinking too hard about it." I quote, "Then from there you can decide things like, since Final Fantasy 16 was real-time action, my Final Fantasy is going to have both real-time action and turn-based battles. Or you can go the other extreme and return to its fully turn-based pixel art roots." So to that last option, Yoshida replied, "That's crazy. That will be groundbreaking. Notably, this isn't the first time Yoshi P brought up Final Fantasy 17 with pixel art, even though he's clearly just spitballing in both instances back in June 2022. Like I said, when developers are spitballing or constantly keep throwing out that notion of what they would like or a concept, best believe we're going to see that concept manifest in some shape or form. When they constantly keep talking about that, these guys already either implemented or it's already in development, or some of that concept ends up leaking into whatever project that they have. So I wouldn't be surprised. They take a bold step like that and do something completely different and turn people on their head with Final Fantasy 16. So it says, he informally suggested that if Final Fantasy 17 does return to full turn-based combat, it should be presented with pixel art graphics in order to fit that system better. While he also admitted at the time that if you decide to go back to pixel art graphics, that then people will be going to be like, hey, what are they doing? Why are they going back to pixel art graphics? Square Enix has expressed interest in more games in the HD 2D style, Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, and the upcoming Dragon Quest remakes, so it's not entirely outside the realm of possibilities. Now, yes, this is interesting. This is something I wanted to talk about real quick. Now, it seemed like that these guys are fishing some ideas. It seemed like right now, Square Enix, in my personal opinion, I'm thinking when it comes to Final Fantasy in the mainline series, I really think what's going on here is they trying to find a middle ground, or they trying to see what works, what doesn't work, and then they take the best things that work and then try to combine it into one. Because hear me out here, we've seen what happened with Final Fantasy 15. I hated that game, really didn't like the combat to that game at all. And then you look at Final Fantasy 7 Remake. Now, like I said before, despite how I feel about the story, I enjoyed the fuck out of that gameplay. It was the best. It was like a hybrid of action RPG with the ATB system, and it was the perfect blend. And I was hoping that Final Fantasy 16 would take on that trend. And because if that's going to be the combat, I would love to see the combat for Final Fantasy moving forward. The mainline entries adopt Final Fantasy 7 Remake, but each entry, they add their own twist to that, what they always have been doing with Final Fantasy turn-based ATB combat systems. So when it got to 16, I was hoping it was going to do a bit of that, but have their own twist with Final Fantasy 16 twist. But instead, they went complete action. So we had two different types of Final Fantasies going on as far as gameplay. Final Fantasy 7 Remake had the ATB hybrid action RPG elements, and then you had Final Fantasy 16 that went full on action and was less RPG. To me, it seemed like this was pretty much like, in my personal opinion, they was throwing out these like test samples to see how the fans, gravitate towards it. And in my personal opinion, Yoshi P and them starting to realize that 16 in the direction he went did cause a lot of controversy. And they haven't really, as far as sales are concerned, we're hearing so many different reports. It's doing well, it didn't do too well. It's too much controversy surrounding it. So to me, in my personal opinion, I'm thinking that they say, maybe we shouldn't go this direction. Maybe we should pump the brakes and go a little bit back, and maybe create a hybrid so we give the best of both worlds as far as gameplay is concerned. So they could probably take some elements from Final Fantasy VII Remake combat and gameplay mechanics, and probably take some Final Fantasy 16, blend it together, and see what they come out with. And then you also have this idea of going both hybrid, turn-based, and then going with action RPG, with which I mentioned with the Trial series. I think that would be pretty awesome. Then both communities or fan bases can have what they want, and I think that's what they're trying to, what they may be alluding to. And then the interesting thing, we have Yoshi P talking about, what if we create two Final Fantasies 17s, where we have, our action RPG Final Fantasy 17, and then we have our pixel art traditional turn-based RPG for Final Fantasy. Now, this is definitely a unique approach. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Will it be expensive? Most likely. We've seen development of two different games before that launched. We've seen Super Smash Bros. For Wii U and Smash Bros. For 3DS. Those were two different development teams, two different development cycles that they had, and then what they did was they released the Nintendo 3DS version first, which I really enjoyed. I enjoyed the 3DS version of Super Smash Bros. Maybe enjoyed it more for some strange reason than the Wii U version for some odd reason. But they had two different teams, and one version had completely different, some had different stages, then the other side had different stages with the Wii U version. So it's not like it's impossible, and I wouldn't say that's out of the realm of possibilities. I can definitely see them releasing two Final Fantasy 17s to cater to both audience. So what happens is you can release the pixel version at a later date or earlier date, so fans can get their hands on Final Fantasy 17 that way. So people be able to play it. Probably release it a month or two before they release the actual, console version and PC version that everybody want, with the high fidelity graphics and stuff like that. In game, in the action RPG aspect, I can definitely see them taking that approach. Right about this time, Square Enix is throwing darts at the wall to see what sticks as far as Final Fantasy, because it's clear that they don't really want to do turn-based with Final Fantasy. They just want to get away from that. That's why they're creating all these other franchises that still keep that traditional turn-based thing, but they fixated on wanting Final Fantasy to go action RPG based or full-on action. So to satisfy both of that, this to me sounds like another experiment. just do 2 different Final Fantasy 17s to see which one sticks, or to see, like, hey, we can cater to both sides. So I think that'd be an interesting approach, and I wouldn't mind that approach, because evidently I will end up buying both versions anyway to be able to see which one I enjoyed the most, and there'd be great content here on this channel. So I definitely want to hear your thoughts. Do you think it'll be a crazy idea to have 2 different Final Fantasy 17s released? Do you think it's stupid? Do you think this would be something that you'll be on board with? And what would you want from a Final Fantasy 17 as far as genre is concerned, gameplay mechanics? Do you want the class system return? Like, what kind of protagonist would you like to see in the game? You know, so if you like this video, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe button for more gaming content here on this channel. This is Mugen Lord, sign off. I'll see you Game Fiends later. Peace out.